And look, we're live. We're live. So for the folks who are going to be tuning in, if you're not tuned in yet, please go ahead and fall into this room. Today, we're going to talk about a very serious topic, something that hundreds, if not thousands, of District 3 residents have been reaching out to me about, and that's the topic of homelessness. If people were not aware, there was a recent study that was done, a report that was done by the office of our auditor in Courtney Ruby, talking about some of the impacts of homelessness and the fact that the city of Oakland does not have a plan. So we're going to dig a little bit into that, as well as the story of what's happening from a different level around mental health and illness that some of us know very closely from family members, loved ones, or just seeing it out in the community. So I'm gonna turn it over in just a second to Patricia. Patricia, there is a lot of background noise happening. I don't know if there's other folks that can kind of relax about what's going on in the background there, but I do want to open up the floor for you to talk about your experiences with homelessness as a provider. Talk to us a little bit about, what you think should change, the landscape. After we hear from Patricia, we're going to hear from.
My name's Katie.
Kate, why did they gave me the wrong?
That's okay. There's a Patricia that has a statement in the chat. That's why it's confusing.
I'm sorry, Katie.
That's fine.
Katie met with me, it's been a few months ago now, with a group of other women who wanted to talk about their stories in relationships with mental health and the need for a different type of services. And that's what Katie's going to talk to us about. I apologize, Katie.
Oh, that's fine. It's fine.
And then we're going to hear from folks from Alameda County, because that's another department in the city of Oakland that serves this community. And has a big chunk of the responsibility of dealing with homelessness in the city of Oakland and throughout the county. And then we're going to hear from James Van, former architect and just advocate for housing, not just for renters through the Oakland Tenants Union, but the unsheltered population in Oakland as well. So without further ado, Katie, please take it away.
That's okay. Hi, and thank you for having us. Myself, Katie, and another mom are here with FASME. We work with FASME, Families Advocating for the Seriously Mentally Ill. We are a young, very grassroots organization of families. I will start with a brief history of how we got to our current abysmal situation, and both of us will try to put a human face on the wrongs that we're all here to address. So let's start with some numbers. It's estimated that 30% of our unhoused neighbors have moderate to severe mental illness. This 30% holds true for our jails. Between 2014 and 2019, just 5 years, we have lost, not gained, over 2,200 licensed board and care beds for those with serious mental illness in Alameda County. And this is primarily due to gentrification and lack of adequate funding. And finally, since the 60s, we have lost 97% of our hospital beds. When we say serious mental illness, we are referring to the organic brain illnesses ranging on the psychotic spectrum from schizophrenia to bipolar to delusional disorder. These are our children. A disproportionate number of Black women and Black men are being 5150'd and incarcerated. This does not result in treatment, but instead the revolving door back to the streets so they relive again the very conditions that caused them to be 5150'd. We must break this cycle. We need treatment. We need supportive housing now. Without these basics, this cycle of pain and death will only continue to accelerate. So how did we get here? How did prisons become our mental hospitals and the cold, filthy streets, the beds of our loved ones? I'm going to start with World War II, when conscientious objectors were sent to work in the huge mental institutions of the day, and the conditions they saw and documented there were horrid. I refer you to a Life magazine expose titled Bedlam, 1946. The conditions were horrifying, but no more so than what we see in our streets. And the conditions for our folks in prison are medieval. There's a really good book called Crazy by Pete Early, if you want to read up on that. Following these revelations, we saw the introduction of the first antipsychotics, with high hopes that those with serious mental illness could now live successfully on their own. Kennedy proposed emptying the hospitals and replacing them with what he called community mental health centers, which, as we know, were never funded properly. There developed a counter-argument that doubted the existence of mental illness, an anti-psychiatry movement that continues today, and a patients' rights movement. And last but not least, when we got federal Medicare and Medicaid in the 60s, we also got the IMD exclusion, the Institute of Mental Disease Exclusion. This means the federal government will not reimburse states for the cost of psychiatric hospitals with more than 16 beds, though it will help with costs if they go instead to other types of community services. All of this has resulted in a decrease by 97% of locked hospital beds since 1955. Now, we're not advocating, we don't want a return to the conditions of the 40s. We don't want patients' rights to be eliminated. But as we often hear said, the pendulum has swung too far in the other direction. In an adequate mental health system with a continuum of care, hospitalization, when necessary, is an essential part of that care. We need more secure hospital beds and supportive housing tailored to the needs of the individual, and we need them now. I am a mother, and that's all I'm going to say about that. And I work in the mental health system. My job is working with the families of those with serious mental illness. That is part of a team we try to connect to mental health services. And let me tell you how very difficult this is. I laughed when I read in the recent Department of Justice report that they had asked people in John George if they would have accepted community services if these services had been offered to them. And they said yes. In reality, it's not like that. The very nature of the illness, when severe, prevents people suffering from psychosis to even know that they have an illness. Many of these folks are homeless, going in and out of jail, revolving through crisis stabilization. Many are still living with their families. The families call 911 or a crisis response team because they are bewildered and frightened and often in danger. But they're told that their child or mother or brother is just not yet sufficiently ill and dangerous to be hospitalized. Families have actually been told they want to see the blood first. Sadly, I am assisting an increasing number of families get restraining orders against their loved ones, thus criminalizing them and sending them to the streets. Why? Because that's what the police tell them to do. Why? Because there are not enough hospital beds to treat them and supportive housing for them to live in. Families are in danger, yes. In spite of what you may have heard, those with untreated, serious mental illness are more dangerous and more likely to kill themselves. It is incredibly difficult to have someone 5150, especially if they're living at home. It seems that if you cause a problem on the streets to the public or to businesses, then you are more likely to be taken to John George. And sometimes they use John George as a way to remove homeless people when there's too many complaints. I'll just, PES. But that doesn't mean you'll be hospitalized. People are taken to PES, which is for crisis stabilization. There it is hoped you will calm down and can be released right back to the streets you came from without any meaningful change. Hence the revolving door, John George, that we hear so much about. Keep in mind that out of 20 people, 5150'd and taken to John George Psych Emergency Services, only 3 are actually admitted into John George, the hospital, and then not for very long. Without enough treatment beds, we cannot find help in the form of a 5150 until our loved ones have reached a point where they are not just likely to hurt themselves or others, but they are on the very verge of doing it. And sometimes that help comes too late. We moms are speaking today because those we love cannot speak for themselves. Psychosis has often been romanticized, but let me tell you, as a mother, there is nothing quite like hearing your beloved son or daughter cry in pain and beg the voices tormenting them to stop. We stand by helplessly as our child slowly disappears into the illness and is lost from their place in this world with us. We need supportive housing and we need secure treatment facilities. There is no cheap, easy fix of the hole we've spent decades digging ourselves into. And I think I left out a paragraph that I want to go back and read. In an adequate mental health system with a continuum of care, hospitalization, when necessary, is an essential part of that care. I want to make sure I say that. That's all. That's all I have to say. Well, I have lots more to say, believe me. We've put links into the chat that we hope you will look at. We have our mission statement, FASME's mission statement in there. We have a flyer for a protest we're holding on May 7th. And we have a statement, an excellent statement from a mother with a homeless son who explains why it's going to be really difficult to house those that we have left on the streets for so long. The longer they're on the streets, the harder it is to house them for many reasons. And now I'm going to turn this over to my friend, a mom. I'm going to turn the video off because she does need to remain anonymous.
Hello, everyone. My son has schizophrenia. His brain does not function properly. His everyday world is full of delusions that are real to him. He cannot tell you how they can be real. It's just like magic. They just are real. An example, the dog talks to him through his mind. Psychosis is more intermittent, strikes out of the clear blue sky. An example, he has to murder me. Psychosis being a complete and total break from reality, there is no logic to deal with this one. He almost killed me, slashed my throat, sliced my kidney in half, my liver. It was really bad. Now he's in jail. Treatment would have helped, but he fell through the cracks. Now our suffering is worse than before. This trauma lives in him. He is very sick and in need of treatment. He won't get it in prison, and Napa State Hospital has no beds. Living in prison is no life. His life is over. And mine might be too. Without treatment, when he gets released, he could easily attack me again. And then something else I wanted to talk about is, Katie touched on this, that we and the public is told a lot that seriously mentally ill people are more likely to be victims of violence. But it is the untreated, seriously mentally ill that become violent as they feel compelled to act on their delusions. A common delusion is to see someone as a devil. This puts the person in a horrible dilemma. Who among us would not want to destroy this devil if we were confronted with it? Another delusion is seeing or hearing great harm being done by someone else. And we're all taught to help each other. And this is what the seriously mentally ill person feels they are doing. They're stopping the harm. All this violent behavior is based on the delusion. It's not reality, but to the person with the mental illness, it is very real. That's why we need treatment.
And thank you. Where is the, I'm gonna turn the camera back on. That's us. That's it.
Well, Katie, first, I just want to thank both of you as moms for sharing your story, because I know so many other mothers who've gone through this exact same experience. And right now we have someone who's joining us, Ayana Davis, saying she's describing my whole life right now with my son. And it's just tears, and I know exactly. I haven't walked in those footsteps, but so many sisters that I know have. And there are no solutions and no answers. There's no housing, there's no treatment. And that's why I wanted to have you here today, because when we see these individuals in the streets and in the public, and we lose empathy by just saying that they're a problem, but there's been no real intervention to help them and to help families make sure that they're not problems. And like you said, this situation goes back decades. And I do want to share with you the love that's coming. Nancy Mandel says to tell you hi.
Oh, hi.
We also have a comment from Allison Monroe saying if people could be treated for more than a day or two and supported afterward, they would not cycle through John George in jail so rapidly.
And housed.
Housing is a key.
Housing is so important.
Can you speak a little bit about why housing is important, especially for people that are experiencing some of the challenges that you've been through or that you've witnessed?
Well, I think all of us, I'll try to speak from the point of view, and help me here, my friend, of the person suffering. And that is that they want stability. They want to know that there's food. They want to, they want those things. From the point of view of and housing for them, if we had an adequate continuum of care, they would go from the hospital when they've been stabilized on medication, and hopefully we need treatment facilities that will treat both SUD, substance abuse issues, because a lot of people with serious mental illness turn to street drugs to ease the pain. A lot turn to meth, which seems crazy, but it's where they go. It's a lot of times. So we need treatment facilities to separate that, the drugs from the person, give them adequate stabilization on medication. Then we need case management teams to follow them from the hospital to a stable living environment where they can be encouraged to continue to take their medication. If they're released to the streets, it's not going to happen. It's just this, whatever stability was gained is lost once they're out of the hospital without a stable living environment to go to. Now, from the point of view of the families, if somebody can be stabilized and live peacefully on medication, then most of the time the families want them back home, want to care for them. But, not always. I mean, families are not just physically in danger from these illnesses, their housing is danger. I have worked with so many families that are in Section 8 or just living from precariously, and the behavior of their loved ones threatens their ability to remain in their own housing. So we're not treating our loved ones properly, endangers housing on a number of different. Housing is needed in a number of different ways. I hope I'm making sense here. Do you want to add?
I wanted to say that the treatment that we're talking about is intensive treatment and kind of, you've heard wraparound services. Mm-hmm. The best services that we've come across are conservatorships, where the courts get involved, because there's this part of the illness for about 40% of the people with schizophrenia and psychosis illnesses, that it's called anosognosia, and it's part of their brain that they can't see that they have a disease. I'm not sick. I don't need help. Get away from me. I don't need that medicine. I'm not going to the hospital. So they push back on being treated. They don't want it. They don't need it. They're not sick, but they are. So the kind of treatment for the sickest of the sick is going to need to be intensive. So you can't just put them in a house. You've got to have, like Katie said, case management. You've got to have intensive follow-up. Like they need to be part of the team. They need to take part in their plan of care, where they take their medicine and they're followed up by a team of people assigned to them. And that's the best treatment. In a hospital bed. It can be in a house. It can be in a housed area.
So I see. So housing is not only key with wraparound services for some of the individuals that are challenged with these particular mental health issues, but also just ensuring that the family members who are housing them are stable in their
Mhm.
well. And if they become not amenable to living with family members, we have to have other housing solutions for our family members who are
Right.
challenged. I see what you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, family members are not supported. You know,
Yeah.
there are a few groups in Alameda County. We have FERC, Family Educational Resource Center, which is excellent in helping families navigate the system. We have the NAMIs that provide support groups. But generally, within this whole system, families do not get attention. We have to learn to be social workers, psychiatrists, at the same time that we're mothers or brothers. And we don't know how to do it.
And we're locked
We're
out
not
from
trained to
HIPAA.
do this, and we certainly are not paid to do it.
And we're locked out from HIPAA.
And we're locked out from even knowing what's going on by HIPAA laws.
Mm. It sounds like there's a lot to work on, but I do want to say it looks like, and I hope I'm pronouncing this correctly, Ildiko Poloni says, "Love you, Mom."
Oh, hi.
So there's some love out there for you. There's also someone who's with us that's saying living on the streets is stressful, and stress exacerbates mental illness.
Yep, exactly.
And so I'm hearing you say, Katie, that also without adequate medical care, which we need, universal health care,
Mhm.
people turn to street drugs to numb some of the conditions that might otherwise be prescription drugs, or might use illicit drugs in order to numb the pain. And so that's some of what we're seeing too. When we see people with mental health issues on the streets, they're usually there because of, I think what you said is, they're untreated. Their symptoms have gone untreated, and that's when people start to become violent. But those things can be managed if there's a plan in place to stop it before it gets there.
Right.
Is that what I'm understanding?
Yeah, it should be a standard of care that they get adequate treatment early, and not just go through the cycle over and over and over again.
Right. And we're talking about different, I don't know exactly what to call it, different kinds of supportive housing. Some people are going to need the kind that Diane is describing, some less so. We would prefer that people could live in mixed housing situations where they're not just like, okay, all you folks with mental illness, you go over there and live. But in some cases, people will need to be living in more sheltered situations with more wraparound services. So it's not like one size fits all, but we don't have much of any of it. I mean, seriously, it is just shameful. I mean, one of the first questions families ask me is, what's going to happen when I die? And I have no good answer. None. I mean, we work with old people and we don't know where to put them.
So, Katie, whose responsibility is it? Is it a national issue? Like, is it something that we need from the federal government? Is it a county issue? Should the Alameda County Behavioral Health or the county just in general be involved? Whose responsibility is it to come together to start to tackle these problems?
Personally, I think it's federal. I think this is a national crisis. I mean, it may be particularly acute in the Bay Area or in LA and places where there's such a high degree of homelessness. And I don't know much about what goes on in other parts of the country, but I know that there are organizations that agree with what my friend and I have been saying, that are national, that address that it is a national problem. I mean, I think, you know, our non-funding of HUD is one of the problems that led to this. I mean, it's huge. It's going to take a lot of money to deal with this because we have let it go for so long.
Right.
But we can't do it any longer. The whole system is going to implode, I'm telling you, if we don't start to deal with this.
Carroll, a program in Milwaukee that they when the seriously mentally ill are released from jail or prison, they go through this. There's a building set up in the city, and all the services are there. Their food, their money from Social Security, their medicines, their doctors, their counselors. Everybody is in this building, and they have to go there every day and get their whatever it is, their treatment, their meal, and then they're allowed to go back and live in their supported housing. Next day, they go back to this it's a one building, and they have housing close by. So it's a doable thing for these people. And they don't want to go back to jail, so it's a good incentive for them to go through this program.
So you're going to have to email me that information.
I will.
And I do like to end on a positive note, a model that we can look at, because this is a very, very serious issue. It's an issue that has intersection with so many others. And the intersecting issue that I wanted to talk about tonight is housing, just because I get so many emails of people complaining about unsheltered people with mental health issues. And until we start to see each other with humanity, we're not going to think about what solutions are. So I'm happy that from two mothers, I got some direction about where to look for what we should be doing differently. And one of the things I'm really invested in is making sure that there's housing for every sector of individual who need it. And I do want to thank you, Katie, and I want to thank you, our other special angel mom who was on, for sharing what you've experienced, and the trauma that you went through is not something that anyone else should have to experience. And we've got to do everything that we can to change the systems and change the dynamics so we see each other as human beings and start to love each other a little bit more. So thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Is there anything else you wanted to leave us with?
Another example is Trieste, Italy.
Yeah.
They have the best in the whole world that I know of for treating their seriously mentally ill or anybody with any kind of psychotic break when they're young. The system is so well endowed in the area that they catch these people young. They give them full treatment. The team comes to the house. The doctor goes to the house
2 or 3 times a day.
2 or 3 times a day if they need to. They have a nurse, they have a social worker, they have a psychiatrist. The whole team goes to see the person to make sure they're doing well. They get to, guess what? They get to stay in their home. Wow. They don't become homeless. They don't have a homeless problem because they take care of it early and correctly.
Do they have socialized healthcare there?
Yes.
Listen, we've got to push past this narrative of we need to be rugged individuals in the United States of America. We've got to look at how do we take care of each other and how do we fund the things that people actually need in order to survive. Right. And universal health care is one of those things. We also need to look at social housing as a solution to this market-based dynamic that we have, because what we're doing right now is not working. It is not. And we will all suffer as a result of it. So I just want to say thank you for holding up models. Thank you for being the voices of other families who cannot speak for themselves. Jen Finley is saying thank you so much for sharing yourselves and your stories. I cannot say that enough. And we will be in further contact about what we can do on the local level. So thank you.
Thank you, Carol.
Thank you.
No problem.
So I'm going to turn my video off and my mic.
Yes. And we're going to bring in our next guest. We're going to hear from the County of Alameda just about what's happening at the county level and how we can be better partners with the city and the county. Recently, I was in a meeting with some folks from the County of Alameda, and I was told that the increase in rents in the city of Oakland are directly proportional, and they map almost identically with the increase in homelessness. And I think we all know that there's a relationship there. I was just scrolling through social media today and saw that there's another luxury development. And guess where? It's in my district, and it was before my time, but another luxury development downtown where a 2-bedroom apartment starts at $4,130 a month. And that is that's the floor for what the rents are. And we've been screaming from the top of our lungs for years that the rents are too damn high. And I apologize for folks if you have issue with saying damn, but I really think the conditions that we're experiencing in the city of Oakland are way worse than any swear words I could possibly say right now. So I'm not sure if we have we have our guest from the county. Hello. Why don't you, because we're a little bit behind, if you could introduce yourself and what you do at the County of Alameda and tell us how to solve the housing crisis.
More housing. Hi, my name is Carrie Abbott, and I direct the Office of Homeless Care and Coordination, which is in the Healthcare Services Agency for the county. And at the end of 2019, the Board of Supervisors and the major agencies decided to form one sort of coordinating agency to try to address homelessness so that there wouldn't be any more hot potato, there wouldn't be any more who's on first. It would be like, we know who to ask, what's going on with the county around homelessness. And so my office was formed at the end of 2019. I was at Department of One when COVID hit, so it's been quite an adventure since then. But we really do have things coming together now. We've been working to consolidate the work of the county within Healthcare Services Agency and looking at how we can really grow, right size our system's response to homelessness. And really importantly, we've been working with Oakland and with our provider agencies, with people who are homeless or who've been homeless, to try to really understand responding to homelessness with a racial equity lens. Because one of the things that we see is that 70% of the homeless population in Oakland is African American, and only 24% of the general population. That is not okay. We see that the new entries into homelessness are really, really disproportionately African American and Native American, in fact. And so, one of the things that we've been looking at for the last year is, in order to meet this crisis effectively, we have to dismantle the structural racism that leads to homelessness in Alameda County. And one of the things that we see really, really clearly is that the economic issues are a major causative factor for people of African descent becoming homeless in Oakland and Alameda County. I have some slides. I can share them or I can just talk through them. I think it's up to you, Councilmember.
I like slides.
Okay.
Is it possible on our back end to share the screen and show some slides that Carrie has? And while we're trying to figure that out, I want to articulate to the people who are tuned in that this issue is hugely complex and it is generations old. And so we understand that we're not going to solve it overnight, but I know I'm going to give it the old college try, because I'm only here for a brief moment, and I'm going to do everything in my power to address it with the full just scope of everything and everybody I know in my networks and this new position. So I'm not sure, Mari, if we can share the screens, but I'm going to read through some of these comments because, oh my goodness, one of my youth advisors from an organization I was in high school is in the comments. Oh my goodness, Miss Gloria White Gardner, it's an honor that you're here. I love you. Thanks for being here. I'm going to read a couple. Carrie, do you want the whole screen to show, or do you want just one? There we go. And that's perfect. Socialized medicine and infrastructure already exists in Medicare. We just need it for all. We need Medicare for all. We know that. And we're going to get into some of the comments a little later. But yes, please, Carrie, continue with the slides.
All right. And thank you again for inviting me. So the Office of Homeless Care and Coordination, again, was intended to really consolidate the work of Healthcare Services Agency for the county, but also to coordinate the response of all of the county agencies. And our goal is to do this by lifting up the voices of people who are homeless, by getting direct input and shared data. We have a commitment to promoting equity and combating racism. We want to use the substantial resources available to the county always to prioritize responding to homelessness. And we want to look to new opportunities to really expand and refine our systems based on what we learn as we go. So this is part of the data that we were just talking about. This is our total homeless population and trend data from 2015 to 2019. Really, really close in terms of the grand scheme of things, in terms of timing. We went from having 2191 people homeless just in Oakland in 2015 to having over 4,000 people who are homeless in Oakland in 2019. So really nearly doubling the population of people experiencing homelessness in Oakland, and fully doubling the population of people experiencing homelessness in the county, which went from around 4,000 to around 8,000 in those same 4 years. So simultaneously, here's what's happening with the rents. We went from an average rent, so these are all the different sizes of apartments in 2012 of $1,400, $1,472 a month, to in 2019 over $2,300 a month. And in the same time period, we saw vacancies go down significantly, not as significantly as rents went up, but significantly the vacancies went down. So even though the rents are going higher, the availability was getting lower. And I mean, guess who gets pushed out in that circumstance? So housing costs in 2020, if you look at a studio apartment, so really like all you need if you're a single person to be able to live with your own kitchen and bathroom, studio apartment in 2020 was almost $1,500 a month. What that means is, in order to qualify for that apartment, you're going to need to be earning $5,000 a month. And you know, even if you pay half of your half of your income for rent, you still are going to need to have about $3,000 a month. But what we see among people who are homeless is almost everyone has an income of less than $1,000 a month. If you're on Social Security disability, the national average is about $1,200 a month. CalWORKs is under $1,000, and Alameda County General Assistance was $336 a month. So not even close. Like if you paid 3 times your income, you still wouldn't be able to afford an apartment, a studio apartment. So the other thing that the council member asked me to look at a little bit was what the county does, what we fund, what we're working on. So these are just some of the activities that we're engaged in. We oversee respite beds, so people coming out of hospitals who are homeless, or people who are very medically fragile and on the street. We oversee shelter health. That was really, really active during COVID, as you can imagine, helping the shelters plan how to reduce occupancy, to keep people safe during COVID. This was really effective. The combination of lowering the number of people in congregate shelters and then opening the 1,200 hotel rooms has really resulted in only having about a 1.7% overall case positivity rate in COVID among homeless people, which is just amazing. We were pretty terrified when we opened the hotels that we would have large outbreaks in the homeless population, and we've mostly been able to avoid that. We also fund some of the services and operations in shelters and navigation centers. We have a really big presence in the outreach and street health services. Alameda County funds healthcare for the homeless and the street health teams. We fund these in collaboration with the city of Oakland for the Oakland teams. We provide outreach from the housing resource centers or access points. And we have an encampment response team that will go out and assist if there's an encampment on county land or in the unincorporated county. And then one of our big lines of business that people don't see a lot is we fund the supportive housing services. So if there are case managers, social workers in permanent supportive housing, that's often funded through Alameda County Behavioral Health and through our Office of Homeless Care and Coordination. In addition, through the Social Services Agency, we have in-home support services, foster care, and independent living services program, and food support. We fund housing subsidies, one-time assistance, rapid rehousing, permanent supportive housing, and other short and long-term. And then housing development is funded through the county's HCD. Oakland also has a housing and community development department that we work with pretty closely and provide operations support and oversight. We also run coordinated entry. Very recently, we've taken that on. It used to be kind of jointly held between the cities and Everyone Home, which is a nonprofit organization, and the county. And Healthcare Services is now kind of trying to overhaul coordinated entry, expand access in low-income neighborhoods, and expand the number of access points throughout the county. This is not that exciting, but the homelessness information technology, we run a site called Elemento, which gives resource information. We fund 211, which has all kinds of social services referral information, the community health records, and the homeless management information system, which is how we keep track of what resources homeless people have access to. And then the Social Services Agency developed the Fast Shelter app so people can find shelter beds when they're available. And then finally, we're pretty involved in the homelessness planning and oversight with the Continuum of Care and the Racial Equity Committee and the Race Equity Action Plan, which is a sort of regional group of different counties and providers and people with lived experience coming together to look at how we now implement the systems modeling needs analysis work that we did in the last year. And then just because I'm hoping some people are curious what happened with Measure W and what the county's plans are around homelessness. The county's plans are to significantly, if and when we have revenue available, to increase our housing and connected services. That's the biggest priority. So really promoting ongoing housing subsidies, care coordination that goes with that, housing navigation that goes with that, housing location services and stabilization that go with that. And then also focusing on prevention and housing problem solving, interim housing and street-based services, and our coordinated and accountable system. Sorry, so I know I went through that really quickly, but I heard that we were a little bit behind. So I'm happy to answer any questions.
And Carrie, we have so many questions. So I'm going to try to ask our back-end assistants to help us throw up some of the questions that we have on there. But while we're fielding those, here's one from Robin Walker. How many services are farmed out through third-party providers? If I don't know what SOWH means. Do you know what that means?
No.
I don't know. So how many services are farmed out through third-party providers?
That's a good question. I would say the vast majority. Healthcare for the Homeless has some direct services staff, and Alameda County Behavioral Health has some direct services staff. Other than that, the vast majority of services are contracted to nonprofit organizations.
Does that allow us to keep up with what the data is if people are really getting served? One of the things I'll just add quickly is that in City Council, I'm advocating for funds that come from the state, that come from our federal dollars, stay in-house, because there's more oversight as a city body that taxpayers pay their money for, to do inquiry into whether or not our services that are being provided are actually helping people. So I don't know how, you haven't been in your position very long, but still, is that the best, from your perspective, the best use of funds?
Well,
am I asking tough questions?
I mean, I would say, if we have, there are several reasons to do things in-house, and there are several reasons to contract out. Typically, the nonprofit providers are faster to deploy services. It can take us a long time to set things up in civil service. That's one of the hardest things for me in responding to homelessness is, it's an emergency and we want to be able to respond quickly. And if we don't respond quickly, then people are left sleeping outside. That is always just the hardest thing to reconcile is, trying to, build things the best we can without compromising the need for efficacy, the need for really an immediate response. The other thing is, I would say, most of our nonprofit providers have more people who are formerly homeless working for them. They tend to have an easier kind of on-ramp into employment than the county has. And it might be easier with some of the city agencies, I don't know, but I know with the county, with civil service and with all of the minimum qualifications, it can be really challenging for people who have been homeless and who are living paycheck to paycheck to try to get into permanent employment. And it's something that we want to work on, that we want to fix. But in this moment, we have a lot of mission-driven, really strong nonprofit agencies who can also partner with us. So, and we're the county, right? We have a lot of in-house medical services and in-house social workers as well.
Thank you for that answer. There's so many questions, I don't even know where to start. There's one question by Kimberly G that says, I'll get to, you can keep the Nancy Nadell question up.
Uh-oh.
Is that you, Carrie? That's fine. Does the county have a task group that goes to homeless encampments to meet people where they are? And do they offer Section 8 housing?
Sorry, there is a car alarm in my neighborhood.
We'll get over it. We can hear you.
Yes. So we currently have 14 teams in Alameda County that are through Healthcare for the Homeless, and they work with some city teams in the city of Oakland, city of Berkeley, primarily, and they're largely contracted, but they go hand in hand. So we'll have a nurse and a social worker and an outreach staff who go out together to the encampments. They provide immediate healthcare services. Oh, whew, it stopped. They provide immediate healthcare services. They do assessment and access through coordinated entry, and they set up relationships with people. They don't go to every encampment, and they don't, they're not the respond on a dime team. They're the build relationships with people who are living outside team.
And we are running behind. Can we pull up that last question from Nancy? Good on the housing subsidies. What are issues with Measure W? You sounded like there was doubt that there would be money.
Well, so two issues. Thank you for asking. The one is that we have had multiple legal challenges, and so we don't have access to this money yet, and it's not actually being collected as a tax yet. If you see your sales tax go up, then you'll know that we were successful in the legal battles. The second issue is that we have to have an implementation plan with a really clear budget that our Board of Supervisors will adopt. And before we bring to our Board of Supervisors a proposal, we want to work with our people who are experiencing homelessness and our direct service providers, our leaders across the county to develop the strongest plan we can. That's in progress, and it's all based on the race equity and systems modeling work that's been done over the last year and a half. So those are the issues. We absolutely are prepared to make recommendations for how to devote all of that revenue to ending homelessness.
And Carrie, I think we should have scheduled just a time to talk with you because we are out of time for this particular moment. But
sure.
Can we work together and answer some of the questions? I'm going to go through the chat and get all these questions together, and then we can connect and put them out through my newsletter so people can have.
Of course.
I appreciate you. And it looks like somebody's walking behind you anyway, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to let you go, but I appreciate your time. I appreciate the heavy weight that you have on your shoulders and what you're trying to do. And we will be in constant communication. Thank you for being here with us today, and we will be in conversation.
I really appreciate your attention to this, council member. Thank you. And thanks, everyone.
All right. Bye. So that's a little bit about what Alameda County is doing. And now we're going to go back to Oakland. We heard a little bit from Carrie Abbott about the racialized nature of the housing crisis and how it is directly proportional to rent increases in the city of Oakland, and how 70% of the homeless population, which I'm sure everyone knows by now, is African American, although Black people only make up 24% of the population. We're going to talk about the audit, what was in it, what was left out of it, and we're going to hear from James Van. I hope James Van is here with us to talk a little bit about the homeless audit that just came out from the city of Oakland. James, how are you doing today?
I'm doing fine. And can you hear me?
We can hear you, yes.
Yes. Doing fine. Thank you very much, Carol. And it was a pleasure to see Miss Abbott, Carrie Abbott. She's a different kind of county employee. She's one that's accessible, easy to work with, and very knowledgeable. We've had pleasure working with her. And I also want to say, I really appreciate all the freshness that you bring to City Council. Your coming to City Council, I hope, will mean a change in the way that body operates, because your honesty and your freshness is really, really appealing. And thank you for that.
Oh my goodness. Thank you for sharing that, James. That's my goal, try to do some things differently. But you're going to tell us about the audit and what we should be doing differently when it comes to the homeless crisis that we're experiencing in Oakland. So what do you got to share with us?
Okay, I'm sorry about the light in this room. It's not very good. However, I will try to get into the subject, and I hope people will pick up a few things. As Carol mentioned, about 2 weeks ago, city auditor released an audit, which was supposed to be an audit on homelessness and the city's programs on homelessness, but it turned out to be an audit on the EMT, the Encampment Management Team. And that was very disappointing to us, because both Councilmember Bass and Homeless Advocacy Working Group had really asked for an audit of the city's homelessness programs and their deficiencies, because we've been very unhappy with the program since the Advocacy Working Group was formed. So what is the EMT? The EMT, Encampment Management Team, is a biweekly meeting of department heads and representatives of various departments of the city. And it was staffed formerly by Joe DeVries until Dario Dunstan was brought on last summer, who has now left. And now the former city clerk, who is now assistant city administrator, Latanda Simmons, is the interim homelessness administrator until they bring on regular staff to staff that position. But the encampment management team, as I say, they meet weekly or biweekly, and what they do is decide what actions are to be taken at the individual homelessness camps over the next 2 weeks. So those actions are usually things like which camps are going to be closed, that is, evicted, where the residents are evicted, which are going to be cleaned, and those and which get services. Those are the basic functions that the encampment management team performs. The encampment management team does nothing about rehousing. There's nothing about medical or psychological needs of some of the unhoused residents. Does not provide food, not transportation. Only simple things like trash pickup at some of the camps, at a few of the camps, and some clearing services at fewer of the camps. Although that activity is beginning to pick up in the last report from that group. In October 2020, City Council adopted an encampment management policy. It was developed and presented unsolicited by the administration. The intent of the policy is to limit the rapid growth of tent encampments throughout the city by defining areas of high sensitivity impact and low sensitivity impact, which means where camps would be closed or not permitted, and a few areas supposedly of minimum impact or low sensitivity, which is where encampments might be permitted. However, advocates who have taken the criteria in that policy and superimposed them on maps of the city, have concluded that the criteria that the city has put into this encampment management plan covers 92% of all property in the city, all property within city boundaries, and leaves only 8% of land, which is designated as low sensitivity or low impact, supposedly where unhoused people might be permitted to go. And we're talking about a very small amount of land for what the Homeless Advocacy Working Group now estimate that we have between 10 and 12,000 unhoused residents on the streets of Oakland. Over 200 members spoke at the October 20 meeting where this encampment management policy was adopted. And almost everyone, except about 10 other speakers, were solidly against the proposed policy and felt that it was a negative policy, would only hurt, would not help. And less than 10 people spoke in favor of it, yet the city council unanimously approved the controversial policy. The Homeless Advocacy Group has been pushing for its repeal ever since. Now, this was done in October of 2020. So that was before Carroll, our dear Carroll, and Trevor Reed were elected to the council. So they had no part in this, in adopting this policy. And our so-called friends on the council, when we asked them about why they voted for this atrocious policy, which was solidly rejected by everyone, over 200 speakers, they said the reason they voted, it was strategic, because by voting for it, they would be able to bring it back up for to improve it at a later future date. Well, we don't know. We don't know about that. Discussions within the Homeless Advocacy Working Group among unsheltered people and the general advocate community agree that the encampment management policy, very bad public policy, and unanimously called for its repeal. The audit was released on April 15th. It's a 102-page document, and frankly, those who are homeless advocates and who work with them are puzzled as to how or why this report was even done, or what it was supposed to do, because it only addresses the encampment management team, the group of department heads and so forth who get together weekly or biweekly and determine, what encampments are going to be cleaned or what encampments are going to be evicted. The 102-page report states that it does not address the tough sheds, the tough shed villages. There were a few of those located around in Oakland. Any shelter options. Nothing about vehicle and RV parking. Nor does it even touch on the causes or solutions to homelessness. So we're very much puzzled about how a homeless audit can ignore the 10 to 12,000 unhoused people in at least 140 encampments throughout the city and at least 600 vehicles where people are sleeping in vehicles. On moral grounds alone, the basic welfare of human beings cannot be so easily dismissed. The audit barely mentions the special UN report that was done in 2019, 2020. UN Special Rapporteur on Housing came to Oakland, Los Angeles, and San Francisco and concluded that Oakland has the worst homelessness program in the state. That it is one of the country's worst. In addition, there is a decision, an appellate decision called Martin v. Boise that was issued some time ago and has been upheld every time it's been challenged, which states that you cannot remove a person from public land unless you are providing them with adequate replacement housing accommodations. The city has tried to overlook the Martin v. Boise decision, but we keep trying to remind them of it. The audit concludes with 26 recommendations, basically calling for increased record keeping, better accounting of what the team does, the number of times they go out to encampments, how much garbage they collect, and that kind of thing, which we say does absolutely nothing for housing people or for the problems of homelessness. So we're very disappointed in the audit for that and other reasons. The audit fails to acknowledge that the encampment management plan is nothing. If it's anything, it's simply an eviction program, because it spends most of its verbiage on saying where homeless encampments cannot be, but says nothing about where they can be, nor does it propose or provide any resources or locations where the homeless can be. And activists have discovered that as I indicated, when the maps are superimposed, there's very little left of the city, which are supposedly low sensitivity areas. The encampment management audit reveals something that the homeless advocacy group has been trying to say for the longest, and that points to the gross failings of Mayor Schaaf and her administration to take seriously that homelessness is an important, serious, and urgent issue in Oakland, that deserves a real homelessness plan, which the city does not have. We feel that the auditor did something else that we feel reduces the faith and trust in the audit. Before the audit was released, the auditor revealed the audit to each of the departments that were mentioned in the audit, talked to them, and discuss with them what they liked or not liked about the audit. So before the audit was even released to the public, it had the opportunity to be modified by the departments that it might have criticized more harshly. Another of the mayor's failure to take homelessness seriously are the things that the mayor has done or not done. The Homeless Advocacy Working Group met with the mayor throughout 2020, and a little bit of 2019, 2020, probably about 12 times. And every 6 weeks we would meet with the mayor, and we would bring all the issues that we felt needed to be addressed, as well as probable solutions. In the 12 meetings that we had with the mayor, we can't think of more than possibly one recommendation that was ever attempted to be put in place. In fact, there was one time when we had obtained in the meeting, we had asked for some small workforce programs that would hire homeless people to do some of the cleanup of the encampments. And the Human Services Department said that they had identified some funds that we could start a pilot program where the homeless people could be hired and actually be paid real money. We left the meeting thinking that that was going to go through. We got a communication about 7 days later saying that unfortunately that program would not be able to proceed. We were never told why. The mayor indicated that no such thing as small houses, which have been a solution in many places, or temporary housing or modular housing would ever be part of Oakland's program for homelessness. The only thing she agreed to accept were the tough shed villages, which she got donated by contributions from a lot of her corporate supporters. So the city never had to pay for the tough sheds. In the actual budget of the city, the mayor included only $2 million for the, I'm sorry, did I leave?
You're still here, James. You said the mayor allocated $2 million of the city's general purpose fund towards homeless services?
Yes, that was all that she budgeted. She budgeted
For 2 years?
I don't know what happened to my, I'm sorry. Anyway, but if I'm still talking, I'll just proceed with talking. The auditor found that the services that were put forward by the encampment management team amounted to $12.6 million, which was never budgeted by the city council nor the mayor. The $12.6 million basically were the costs of the encampment management team closing up encampments, only to find out that a few days later, the people had returned to that spot because they have no place else to go. Also, the police said the public works cleanup crews said they had to be accompanied by police, for their own safety. So the police ran up a tremendous budget amount of spending for their services to accompany public works. And other departments that put in, some of them put in some money for some things, I guess, and that they hadn't budgeted. So the mayor said this, the audit said that this meant that they were losing some of the things that they were supposed to do got ignored because they put some of that money toward homelessness. So the auditor found that $12.6 million had been spent when only $2 million had been budgeted by the mayor. So that shows how the mayor accepted or didn't accept homelessness as such a serious problem that the city needed to put significant money into seeing that it was done well. How are we doing on time? I can go into detail or I can finish up.
I wanna get to some of the questions and comments, not just from me, but from some of the people in the chat. So
okay, let me just sort of conclude. The fact that Oakland does not have a workable plan for homelessness harms both the city and the homeless. And as Ms. Abbott stated, and I think as you stated before, we have a whole population in the community that 70% of which are Black people, and yet Black people are only 24% of the population. So something is really wrong in terms of racial equity going on here. The Homeless Advocacy Working Group has pushed for an accommodation now program for the city. What we mean by accommodation now is to provide shelter for people who are homeless that is permanent. It provides a roof and walls, provides a lockable door so that people feel secure about their possessions, and it provides protection from inclement weather and is adequately serviced with hand washing, drinking water, sanitation facilities, regular rubbish pickup, and if possible, electricity and plumbing facilities. But by giving people, some of these may be small houses, small homes as they're called. They can be leased or purchased hotels and motels, platform tents, converted containers, factory-built modular units. There's a whole raft of things that exist on the market that could be used that give people a place of their own where they can have some dignity and some feelings of security while the city does what it can to try to find and put them into permanent housing. The performance audit is grossly lacking in our view, and it should do much more than make assessments and recommendations to improve bad programs in order to try to make them better. A performance audit should also analyze the effectiveness of existing and projected programs to achieve their prescribed functions. A performance audit must not be timid about identifying failed programs that have no possibility of achieving their assigned objectives. The fact that Oakland currently has over 10,000 homeless persons in 140 encampments throughout the city, barely surviving in tents, makeshift shelters, and at least 600 vehicles and RVs, all with minimum, if any, services or supports, makes it mandatory that a performance audit cannot be complete unless it also addresses the causes and potential solutions to homelessness. I will end there and take some questions.
I have questions, James, but I'm going to respect some that I'm seeing come through the chat. But before we get to some of the questions, there's a statement from Nancy Nadell that says, the continual request of HOG has been for land and temporary decent housing to scale. For years, this has been articulated with no city response. Thank you, James, for your patience and persistence. Can you speak a little bit about the $2 million that you mentioned that was put into the budget? Can you say, was that the 2-year budget? Was that a 1-year budget? And why $2 million? That's a lot of money. What's wrong with that?
It sounds like a lot of money, but $2 million was put into the budget basically to cover some of the nonprofit subcontractors. Oakland does not operate any of its own programs. It subcontracts them all out. For instance, let's just look at a Tough Shed Village, for instance. They hire a nonprofit to be the administrator and the coordinator of each Tough Shed Village. The Tough Shed Village has only 20 units, and they will put 2 people into each of those little 8x10 garden sheds.
Mm.
The cost, well, like I say, the city got the Tough Sheds free, so they're not paying for those. But the contract with the nonprofit that they have to administer it runs to $1 million a year. So that's just for one Tough Shed program. At one time, the city had 5 of those scattered around the city with 20 units in each of them. So altogether, the city is only able to serve at most, even if they put people out after 6 months and had 2 shifts of 6 months. The maximum number of people that a Tough Shed Village can serve in a year is 80 people. So with 5, it can possibly serve up to 400 people. But 5 Tough Shed Villages with 5 administrators, nonprofit administrators, would already run you $5 million. So $2 million that the mayor put in the budget didn't even go to cover the administration of the Tough Sheds, let alone the cost of public works crews, which come to collect garbage and to pick up around the villages, the encampments, and also to carry out the eviction processes that the city did very often.
Thank you for that clarification.
Oh, by the way, and that $2 million was for the entire 2 years between 19 and 21.
So it was $2 million, $1 million for the first year, another $1 million for the second year, and that $2 million didn't even cover the costs of those Tough Shed Villages.
That's right.
I see. Do those Tough Sheds have water or bathroom facilities?
No, they don't. They're little garden sheds. They come in parts in the seller, actually, the manufacturer, puts them together on the site. They come with no electricity, no lighting, only one little window. And they didn't have insulation. Then they started to add insulation on the inside because they were terrible to be in, very hot and very cold. So they're not suitable places for people to live in. The Homeless Advocacy Working Group has been unrelenting in its criticism of the Tough Shed Villages and the fact that many of the people who do go into them, they compare them to concentration camps because they're locked and you can't have visitors, you can't have pets, you can't bring in your belongings. It certainly is not a place that respects the dignity of people simply because they don't have a home.
And it sounds like that will be the outcome if we don't have a plan that many Oakland residents will face, just looking at the data that was shared with us from Carrie Abbott about the cost of living and how the rents that are going up are proportional to the number of people that we're experiencing on the streets or who are experiencing homelessness right now. So I'm just wondering, James, especially because I'm hearing this on Twitter and in emails, that there's nothing we can do about the problem of homelessness. It's a regional problem. People are coming in from other cities because Oakland is weak on enforcement or cracking down on homelessness. And the only thing we can do is push people out of here. What do you say to that type of lack of empathy or just negativity around what we can actually do around homelessness?
Well, I certainly think that the fact that 70% of homeless people in Oakland are Black is part of the issue, because I don't think it gets the attention or the seriousness it would get if there were a true racial equity lens applied. The also, statistics show that about 82% of the people who are homeless in Oakland are people who had a residence in Oakland before. They had an Oakland address before they became homeless. So it's been shown that not a lot of people are coming into Oakland because they're homeless and they'll get better services. They don't get better services. The Homeless Advocacy Working Group has stated, the city has said that the solution to homelessness is housing. And we will, when we get enough housing to put people in, then we can end homelessness. Well, that will never happen. The city has just completed building in the high rises throughout downtown about 20,000 new units. Those new units, as you indicated, are high price units that none of the homeless will ever be able to go into. Of the 70,000, a number of developers who took advantage of some state bonuses and permitted a few affordable housing units amounted to a total of 75 units throughout all of these high rises that are available to people making $80,000 a year. Again, that won't touch the homeless people. And the city is fooling itself to think that somehow the city, which has a low vacancy rate, not that many vacancies that are in Oakland, and how can we find enough housing for 10 to 12,000 people homeless if we're going to wait until we get them into housing before we begin to treat them with services and other kinds of issues that can help them return to traditional housing. So the Homeless Advocacy Group is saying, let's forget about getting them into a traditional house right now and get them into an accommodation that's serviceable, that has enough room, that has a lockable door, windows, protects them from the weather. Once they get settled and can be secure in having a place of their own, then we can begin to address the social problems that keeping them homeless.
That's a wonderful answer. Thank you for sharing that. I think it's causing us to lose some of our humanity, not just the people who live in these conditions, because they're used to being treated less than human, but it's also bringing out the worst in some of the housed residents of Oakland. And I originally referred to the EMP, the eviction. I call it the eviction mobilization.
Encampment management plan, yes.
The
encampment management policy, yes.
Right, but I call it the eviction mobilization program because it has literally evicted unsheltered people from every possible space. And what happens is the city is just shifting unsheltered people from place to place. So
that's exactly what's happening.
Yeah, there'll be a clearing, and then so people will leave and then move to a different place in the city and then come back to the same place that was cleaned. And it's because we are not creating the interventions to actually put people in some type of accommodation. I love your terminology of accommodation now, because that's exactly what we need to do. And I'll get into what I plan on doing a little bit later after I take a couple of these questions. It says, Jen Finley is asking, what happened to the money for the sheds by Lake Merritt that got closed?
Well, the sheds that got closed at Lake Merritt, there were 20 sheds there, and they were city found a couple of lots to put them on, so they're not being used right now. The manager who was managing that development has agreed to be the manager when the city assumes ownership or lease of the Lake Merritt Lodge, a 6-story, 92-unit building near Harrison and Grand Avenue. A wonderful facility. And the Homeless Advocacy Working Group has been begging the city literally for at least the past year to buy that facility. And so finally, they got a guarantee from the federal government that if it can be used for people who have specific kinds of needs who are now homeless, the federal government is going to provide the funds for it. So thankfully, that's moving ahead. When Carrie Abbott was here, she talked about the 1,200 rooms that the county had leased aboard as hotels and put many people into those hotels, the most vulnerable people. About 2,000 people from Oakland were housed in those hotels and motels by the county. We tried to get the city to use their CARES money, and the city got $28 million from CARES to purchase and lease hotels so that people would have that kind of privacy, private space, and so forth, and services. The city spent not $1 to buy, lease a hotel. They let the county do it all, and they stood back. So that says something about our city.
It does say something about our city, and I'm going to give you the another 30 seconds, James, to say what we need to be doing as a city with my voice. And I know there are council members who want to rectify the last vote that took place with the eviction mobilization plan last year and do some things differently around homelessness in the city of Oakland. And I'm going to do everything that I can, at least in District 3, to change the conditions. But from your perspective, because you are a titan in this industry, what should we be doing as the city of Oakland?
Well, one of the things that the Homeless Advocacy Working Group believes is that the encampment management policy that was adopted really does need to be rescinded. I don't know if it's possible to rescind it, but it's supposed to be on hold now because we have asked the city to assure us that if they evict all these encampments, as the plan indicates that they plan to do, that there is housing for these people to go to. There are some accommodations that they can go to. The city, and because the Martin v. Boise appellate decision states that you cannot remove a person from public land unless you can provide them with an adequate replacement accommodation or shelter. So the city has never answered our question with that regard. So we think that this plan, this policy that was adopted, needs to be rescinded. That's one. Two, we urge the city to move more. Well, one, to use the federal FEMA money and state money that is coming in. The city's going to be getting $192 million over the next 2 years. The $28 million they got from CARES last year was frittered away in executive salaries, and we don't know where it went. But I think you asked at the time they made that report how many people were actually served. You did not get an answer, and I don't think you've gotten an answer to date. So I think they just wasted that $28 million. The $192 million that's coming in, we hope that they don't do the same thing they're doing now. We want them to move toward an accommodation now program where we can bring in new settlements of cob homes, of canester huts, of things that have been used in other areas and other cities very successfully, that can give a place for the homeless to be that they can call home until they get to move into another house of their own. But they would have a space to be smaller, but they can lock their door. They can protect their belongings. They can feel secure. They can store things. They can go out and make appointments without feeling that all their things are being stolen. If we can just move toward that kind of a program, we're hoping that Nikki will, we're sure that the East 12th Street parcel that's now been put in the hands of a developer to build another high-rise luxury housing. We think that's going to fail and that property will come back to the city. We're hoping that Nikki will use that property when it comes back as a pilot to show how co-governed encampments in an accommodation now setting can actually go a long way towards solving a homeless problem. So we're hoping that we'll be able to work with Nikki on making that come true on the East 12th Street parcel.
Thank you for sharing that, James. And so what you're saying is rescind the EMP because there is no place to house people. So we can't evict people without having a place to actually house them. So that's one thing that needs to happen. And then use the stimulus money on actually purchasing hotels and other accommodations where unsheltered people can be housed. Those are two things that need to happen.
Yes. Okay.
And you heard it from James. James, you're still active with the Homeless Advocacy Working Group then?
Yes, I am. I'm advisory to the steering committee at their request. So they feel free to call on me.
Outstanding. And I appreciate you. It is, we're rounding out on our time right now. And I just wanted to thank you for having the time to spend with us and share what you know, your expertise. And thank you for going through that audit. It was not an audit of homelessness in the city of Oakland. James spelled it out very clear. It was an audit of the EMT, the emergency management team. I guess what was happening with that
encampment management team, right?
And so it didn't assess the things that have been done to date, their efficacy, or a plan moving forward. And the solutions that were given from the homelessness audit were that we need better data and record keeping to address homelessness. We got to do better, and y'all got to push on us to do better. And I just want to say, James, I'm going to go ahead and let you go. You will be hearing from me very soon about our Friday meeting and some things that we're doing and moving up the court with some friends of yours that I recently talked to, Mike Piatak. So I'll be talking to you about the plans that we're working on collectively to address some of the open space and city-owned land to get some interventions there. But thank you for being with us. And
and if you have some questions that you would like to forward to me, I will answer them and get them back to you.
I do, because there's some that we haven't answered from the chat yet. But I just want to let people go in case they haven't had dinner, because I know I haven't, and I've been in meetings since 10 this morning. So thank you for being with us, James.
And thank you, Carroll, for all you're doing.
I'm trying. Okay, so we heard three very different and diverse narratives around housing and homelessness, who needs it, who's not having it, why things are not happening. But we also have some hope and some direction. One of the things that I'll be working on one of the things I'm working on right now is developing pilot programs that are based around the needs and the desires of unsheltered people to create their own spaces with their own hands, with the assistance of local architects, local housed allies who want to assist in making sure people have dignified places to live. Unfortunately, I can't say what the details are, because I found that when I talk freely and openly about the things that I'm working on, somehow they get obstructed in the city. Not sure why that is. And I also meant to ask James before he left, what other stories of gentrification has he seen around the country in his work as an architect and just an organizer and activist around housing justice for renters as well as unsheltered people? Because one of the things that I've seen is that in cities that are becoming highly gentrified, one of the tactics that is often used is to allow crime and homelessness to run rampant. Because what that does is it agitates voters to want to have a tough on crime and tough on homelessness approach, and with a little less concern about people's needs, right? You have a demand for a greater police presence and a demand for criminalizing homelessness, if you let the issues get completely out of control, because then the people who vote and the people who are good tax-paying citizens start to complain more. And I think that's one of the things that we're seeing in the city of Oakland. But that's okay, because we're going to push and we're going to lead with our hearts and with our heads on solutions that actually make life better for everybody. Right now, I'm running into obstructions, but you all will see what I'm doing. And when I get more obstructions, I'm gonna call y'all in as backups to help me push a little harder internally so we can get some things done. But this, I wanna leave by saying, I've been getting a lot of pushback just from A's fans for saying that my priorities in this particular moment right now are homelessness and public safety. And some of the pushback I'm hearing is, she's corrupt. I don't know even how that's logical, because I'm focusing on other things. But I want to reiterate it, because folks are like, oh my God, she's yelling in all caps. Yes, if I had a bullhorn and another way to amplify my voice and make it loud for all the folks in the back from here to Antarctica, I would say it loudly again. Right now, my priorities are the city budget. I'm meeting with my budget team on a weekly basis and meeting with the department heads regularly to make sure that Oakland is operating in a fiscally sound way that lifts up our city workers, as well as all of the other areas that our residents are asking us to pay attention to. And the primary things that my constituents are telling me to focus on are homelessness and public safety. So those are three things. So yes, that is walking and chewing gum at the same time. It's not saying that I'm not doing anything else, because my team is one of the hardest working teams in Northern California, and I would argue the state. So we are doing multiple things, but prioritizing means you're not doing everything at the same time in the same way. Priorities means I'm looking at a few things, and that is where I'm targeting the majority of my energy. If y'all got a problem with that, A's fans, I got a bag of some gummies for y'all, and it's not the kind of gummies that y'all think is good. I just want to articulate that and say it once again loud for the people in the back. My priorities are to ensure that Oakland residents are safe and they are housed, and that our budget is fiscally sound. And so that means that I'm not going to be working on a platform for the A's. That's not my priority when it hasn't been agendized at the city council. It is illegal, it is out of order, and y'all can take a snapshot of this piece and send it out, because that's what I'm gonna do, and just reiterate that for folks. I'm doing what I was elected to do, and I cannot be threatened or bullied or scared with a threat of being recalled for doing what my constituents are asking me to do. That's just not gonna happen. And right now, I have no greater interest to make sure that the root causes of the things that we are impacted by are addressed. That has not yet happened in the city of Oakland. And if you look at the documentary, The Moms of Magnolia, you will hear it from the mayor's own mouth that in her tenure as the mayor, homelessness has increased exponentially. And we've got to do something about it. And that is not $2 million over 2 years to address the issue. We've got to act like this is the crisis that it is. And that means we have to care more about people, not billionaires. So with that said, I love you all. Thank you all for tuning in and turning out. And you will see me a week from now, same bat time, same bat channel, tackling the issues that people don't want to face. I love you, and I will see you soon.